Approaching conflict might seem daunting unless you're looking for a fight, but it becomes easy or easier when we apply two fundamental, simple concepts. I'm Tavish Cardiff. It is our Raw Materials Conflict Week. Conflict is a physical week. We go through and kind of try to figure out where we hold these things in our bodies that keep us in a position of like getting sick or dealing with some kind of long-term illness or injury when we haven't dealt with the internal conflicts, the conflicts between us and another person, or the conflicts between us and the world at large. Conflict itself is a natural state of where we live as human beings, and you don't even really need to pay much attention to the news to see that conflict exists all around you. You can walk into a kindergarten class and see conflict happening and not a lot of effort toward conflict resolution. So, unless you have a teacher really trying to teach that, it's not really part of their curriculum. How do we decide which things we're going to jump in and fight for, and which ones we might sit back and offer some space for? So, back to those two simple concepts. Number one is along the lines of what I just said, recognizing that every single moment we have the opportunity for conflict, that our own individuality, our own personal being is a energetic projection of our thoughts and beliefs, and those aren't going to necessarily line up to the person next to us. If we have siblings, if we live in a family or in a group setting, we will find ourselves, our ideas about how things should be running into the ideas of someone else's how things should be. And depending on personality traits and all kinds of things, we give the right of way sometimes when we shouldn't, or we feel like we shouldn't have. And so it begins to eat at us. It begins to create energetic debris within our bodies that builds up, and now we have internal conflict because we are judging our own actions. So conflict happens, and it's okay. It's natural, and we don't have to, hold our breath and be afraid of it. We can actually use our breath to help us move through it. Concept is simple breathing when we recognize that we are bothered by something. That is not easy to do, and it's sometimes we have to train ourselves a little bit to ask what's going on in our body right now. I remember when my kids were little, and my youngest daughter is pretty energetically perceptive, and she came up to me at one point and she said, "Mom, why are you mad?" And I said, "I'm not mad." And she kind of just pointed out how I looked, and it was the middle of winter. I was freezing cold. I was tense. I was holding everything tensely, and I was probably irritated with something the kids were doing, and whatever I was saying was coming across much more bothered and angry than I was, because my body was so tense. It wasn't allowing the feelings I was having to come to kind of wash over like a wave, to work through me. And what was happening instead was they were all catching, and I didn't realize it. So every time something bothered me, it was hitting this very shallow ability to hold space for it. And here's my 6-year-old pointing out that you look like you're mad even if you say you're not mad, and you're presenting as mad. Your body looks mad. And that was a real lesson for me in starting to see, like, when something bothers me or I'm in conditions that bother me, like cold, how my body reacts in response. And being able to breathe when I'm cold has become a practice for me. And if I don't think about it, if I don't have intention about it, I won't do it. So in the winter, I'm maybe not as reasonable as I am in the summer. Like, that's a real thing, because I am conflicted and bothered within my body. So if I don't spend time clearing it, it's not going to work out. So that first space of breath is the thing that is going to move us into knowing whether it is our time to act or not. If we don't breathe, if we've got something to say, we're just going to say it, and we're not going to think about the consequences. We're not going to think about how it's going to land or who it's going to affect, or whether its impact is even going to change or grow anyone else's opinion, or if it's just kind of stopping them in their tracks. Our ego and our soul play a big part in deciding how we move through conflict. So when we know what's important to us, last week's pillar, our values and ideals, helps us figure out, if something's really important to me, education, I'm going to take steps to fight for it. I'm going to explore that conflict, and I'm going to stand up where I feel like I have a voice, even where I don't, and just try to make my points known. But maybe something else that isn't so much a part of the fiery creative power in me. I may have opinions for sure, but everyone doesn't need to know them all the time. And maybe this is time for someone else's passionate opinion to be in there, so that we each hear from a place of someone's vulnerability and emotion and experience and their story, so that we understand why something is important to someone else that isn't necessarily important to us. I like to say, is this something we can fight or something we should fight? And asking ourselves that question while breathing gives us the chance to know, oh yeah, I really need to say something here. I got to go in on this. Or let me sit back and listen, the sixth pillar, and just see if I need to step up or not. Let me check out where this is going and see if my voice is needed, or I can learn something from the impassioned voices that are before me. So I really think it's important to offer the breath to your own body, so that you can decide whether or not this conflict is really yours or not. If it is, by all means, have at it. But if it isn't, then we really want to take this space to hold space for other people's triggers, to recognize what bothers them and maybe understand a little more about why. We can always offer space for another person when they are in conflict. And let's face it, every single one of us finds ourselves in conflict at one time or another. As your days go on, as your weeks go on, sometimes many times a day, we encounter conflict. That's the time to go fishing in your own body. The practice guidance for this week, and again, if you don't like what I'm offering, anything that comes to you is guidance. Anything that you do to relate to the pillar before you, or any of them, or to pay attention to your breathing, is doing the practice. So for people who are conflicted about whether they're doing it accurately or right or well, there are no measures for this. Just develop your own relationship with each one. And my words are exactly that, guidance. Your relationship is the thing that is going to create the magic. I can't tap in, unless I'm doing an energy session, call me if you want one. But I can't tap into your creative abilities, only you can. And I think we can reflect that to each other, but being able to reach in and pull it out in conflict situations, or for conflict resolution, or to grow conflict into something that moves past it, those are things that are available to each of us. We just each have to find our own way to accessing that. So, practice guidance for this week. Get into your own body, pay attention to your breathing, notice when you are bothered by something, where your breathing stops. Is it in your shoulders? Is it in your back? Is it, does breath get through to your toes? Can you move it through to your toes? And look for all the places in your body where it sticks, and start asking questions about why. This is an easy thing to do all day long. You can do it when you're driving. You can do it when you're doing chores. You can do it at work while you're doing something else. This is a easy multitasking thing when we start having the intention of practicing it. I'll be back next week to talk about intention, or just how many intentions we create in a day. And I hope you all enjoy your week, pulling the threads of our material together and seeing how they all connect, the roots of everything. I appreciate your attention and effort. Please check us out at ourrawmaterial.com. See you next week.